The birthday banner was the first thing I noticed when I walked through the door. It stretched across the entire entryway, bright blue and gold, with little stars hand-painted around the edges. Someone had spent real time on it. Someone had cared enough to climb a ladder and hang it just right, angling the left side up a fraction so it didn't droop. I stood in the doorway of my son's house, holding a wrapped present against my chest, looking at that banner, and I felt something small and quiet move through me. Not sadness exactly. Something more like the very first second when you realize the weather has changed before you've fully admitted to yourself that it has. "Happy 7th birthday, Tyler," it read, in my grandson's favorite color, with the little rocket ships he loved, painted in silver along the border. I had driven 3 hours and 14 minutes to be there. I know the exact time because I always set the GPS, even though I know the route by heart now. 4 years of making that same drive, twice a month sometimes, more when Daniel called and said they needed help. I arrived 12 minutes before the party was supposed to start, which I thought was good. Thoughtful. Not too early to be in the way, not so late that I'd miss anything. My daughter-in-law Stephanie opened the door before I could knock. She had her phone tucked between her ear and her shoulder, and her free hand was gesturing to someone across the room. She looked at me the way you look at the mail carrier. A brief acknowledgement. The transaction completed. The door swinging wider to let me pass. "Eleanor's here," she said, but not to me. To whoever was on the phone. I stepped inside. The house smelled like vanilla frosting and those good candles Stephanie ordered from some company in Portland. It was a beautiful house. 3 bedrooms, a finished basement, a backyard with one of those composite decks that looks like real wood but lasts forever. I knew this house well. I had been to this house many times. And every time I walked through the door, I felt something I couldn't quite name, a particular kind of ache that sits behind the sternum. Quiet and persistent. Like a splinter you've learned to live around. Because 7 months ago, when Daniel and Stephanie found this house, they had come to me with a number. $83,000. That was the gap. That was what stood between them and the down payment they needed. Stephanie's parents had contributed what they could, which was a generous amount, and Daniel had saved carefully over the years. But the market had moved. The house they wanted had gone under contract and come back. And suddenly, they were short. Daniel had called me on a Tuesday evening, and I could hear the stress in his voice, that specific tightness he's had since he was a boy, the way he sounds when he is trying to hold something together and not quite succeeding. "Mom," he said, "I hate to even ask." I told him not to hate it. I told him that's what I was there for. I had the money. After his father passed, I sold the house we'd built together in Clement Falls, and I moved into the smaller place on Birchwood Drive. The market had been kind to us, and Raymond had always been careful with investments. There was enough. I knew there was enough, and I knew Daniel knew there was enough. And so when he asked, I said yes before he finished the sentence. I did not ask for paperwork. I did not ask for a repayment schedule. I did not ask for anything except for him to call me when the closing was done so I could know they were settled. He called. He sounded happy. Stephanie texted me a photo of Tyler in the empty living room, arms spread wide, grinning in that gap-toothed way of his. I printed that photo and put it on my refrigerator. That was 7 months ago. I found a chair near the edge of the living room, one of the folding ones they'd set out for extra guests. The good chairs, the ones from the dining set I'd helped them pick out at the furniture store in March, those were arranged near the food table where Daniel's colleagues and Stephanie's sister and her husband had gathered. I recognized a few faces. I smiled at the ones who looked up. Most did not look up. Tyler came tearing down the hallway a few minutes later, still in his socks, sliding on the hardwood, and when he saw me, his face split into that full-body joy that only 7-year-olds can produce. He launched himself at me, and I caught him the way I always have. Arms ready, heart ready. "Grandma Eleanor." "There he is," I said. "The birthday boy." He pulled back and looked at me with those serious, dark eyes he inherited from Raymond. Did you bring it? Did I bring what? He narrowed his eyes. He knew, I knew. The thing. I patted the wrapped box. He grabbed it and ran. I watched him go, and I sat there in my folding chair, holding the warmth he'd left behind, and I thought, this is enough. This is why I came. But even as I thought it, I knew I was managing myself. I had been managing myself for a long time. The party moved around me the way water moves around a stone. Not unkindly, exactly, but efficiently. Stephanie directed the children toward the games. Daniel carried the cake from the kitchen with great ceremony. The other adults laughed and refilled their cups and took photos of Tyler making faces. I stayed in my chair by the window, and I was present. I was there. I watched every moment of my grandson turning 7. The candles, the song, the frosting. He somehow got on his ear, and I told myself it was fine that no one had brought me a plate of food until I stood up and made my way to the table myself. It was fine that when Daniel gave a little toast and thanked everyone for coming, for helping make this house a home, he looked at his colleagues and Stephanie's family and did not turn to look at me. It was fine. I have spent many years telling myself things were fine. I think it started after Raymond died, or maybe it started before that. Slowly. The way erosion works, you don't see it happening. You only one day notice the ground is different from what it used to be. Daniel was always a good son when he was younger, thoughtful in the way that children are thoughtful when they still need you, visibly, tangibly, every day. But somewhere in the years between his boyhood and his mortgage, the dynamic had shifted. I had shifted it, partly. I stepped in so often, offered so readily, that over time my presence became a given, a utility, something that was simply there, like the water that comes when you turn the tap. I had paid for Tyler's preschool 2 years of it because Stephanie had just gone back to work, and the timing was hard. I had lent Daniel $6,000 the year the car broke down, and the medical bills came at the same time. I had taken 2 weeks off my life and driven to their old apartment to watch Tyler so they could have a real anniversary trip, the first vacation they'd taken alone in years. I had been available. I had been generous. I had answered every call, and I had never once, not once, been asked what I needed. I noticed it, of course. You cannot be a woman of 63 and not notice these things. But noticing and acting on what you notice are very different skills, and somewhere along the way, I had lost the second one. Or maybe I had given it away, traded it, gradually. For the feeling of being necessary, for the relief of knowing that even if I sat in a folding chair by the window, even if no one thought to bring me a plate, I was still needed. I was still woven into the fabric of their lives. That thought, when I finally let myself look at it clearly, was one of the saddest things I had ever considered. It was Tyler who sat down next to me after the cake. He'd escaped the chaos of the other children and climbed into the folding chair beside mine, still holding a fork with a bit of blue frosting on it, and he leaned his warm little head against my arm. "Grandma Eleanor," he said, "did you know our house is the best house?" "I did know that," I said. "Dad says it's because we worked really hard for it." I was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the backyard was golden in the late afternoon light. The composite deck caught the sun in a way that real wood never quite manages, too even, too consistent. Beautiful in its own way. "Your dad did work hard," I said. "Because he had." That was true. Tyler looked up at me. "Are you sad?" Children ask the questions adults have the good manners to avoid. I looked at his face, that earnest face with Raymond's eyes, and I felt something move in me again. Not the small, quiet thing from before, but something larger, something that had been waiting a long time for enough space to move. "No, sweetheart," I told him. "I'm just thinking." He accepted this and ran back to his friends, and I sat there in the folding chair by the window, and I thought, I thought about the $83,000 and how it had never been mentioned again after the closing. I thought about the toast Daniel had given, thanking people who had given their time and their casseroles and their good wishes, while I sat 12 feet away, having found my own plate of food. I thought about the years, not bitterly, not with the sharp, hot feeling of someone freshly wronged, but with the slow, clear-eyed recognition of someone who has finally decided. I had been available for so long that I had become invisible. The difference between those two things is something I wish I had understood decades earlier. I stayed until Tyler opened presents. I stayed until the other guests began to leave in that gradual way parties end, the energy dispersing room by room. I hugged my grandson for a long time, and he smelled like cake and something sweet and young that I will never be able to describe but will never forget. Stephanie thanked me for coming, and she meant it, I think, in the way that people mean things they have not thought carefully about. Daniel walked me to my car and we stood in the driveway for a moment in the early evening air. "Good party," I said. "Yeah, it came together," he said, looking back at the house with the satisfied expression of a man who has built something and knows it. I looked at the house too. "Drive safe, Mom," he said. He was already turning back toward the door. I drove the 3 hours and 14 minutes home. I did not cry on the drive. I want to be clear about that, because I think people expect a woman of my age, in a story like this, to cry at certain moments. But I did not cry. I drove in the particular silence of someone who is finally, after a very long time, thinking straight. The highway was quiet and the sky went from orange to violet to black, and I drove through all of it. And by the time I pulled into my driveway on Birchwood Drive, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I did not do it that night. I made tea. I fed the cat. I sat in the good chair by the front window, the one I have sat in every evening since Raymond died, and I watched the neighborhood settle into its nighttime quiet. I slept well, which surprised me. I had expected to lie awake, troubled by doubt or guilt, or the particular second-guessing that tends to come at 2 in the morning when decisions feel largest. But I slept deeply. And when I woke before sunrise, with the light just beginning to suggest itself at the edge of the curtains, I felt something I recognized. Steadiness. I have not always been a steady person, but I have been steady when it counted. Raymond used to say that about me. "Eleanor, when it counts, you don't waver." I used to think he was being generous. Sitting in that early morning quiet, I decided to believe him. I made coffee before the sun was fully up. I brought it to the desk in the back room, the one that used to be Raymond's study before I made it my own, and I opened the bottom drawer. There is a folder there, dark green, labeled simply Documents. I set it on the desk and opened it. I am not a lawyer, but I am a woman who spent 31 years teaching high school English. And in that time, I developed a precise and unsentimental relationship with language. I understand what words mean. I understand what they do not mean. And I understood, looking at what was in that folder, the personal record I had kept, dates and amounts and the notes I'd made to myself, the way you make notes when you suspect, somewhere in the back of your mind, that you might need them someday, that I had a very clear picture of what had happened. $83,000, transferred 7 months ago. No formal agreement, no note, no acknowledgement of any kind beyond a text message with a photo of a small boy in an empty room. $6,000, 4 years ago. Repaid partially $3,000 and then not again. Tyler's preschool. 14 months of tuition paid directly to the school. $18,400. The anniversary trip, flights, hotel, the dog sitter they'd needed. I'd covered all of it because Stephanie had mentioned, quietly, that they were still paying down credit card debt from the holidays. I had said, don't worry about it. I had meant it. I still meant it. But meaning something and understanding something are also different skills. I sat at Raymond's desk as the sun came fully through the window, and I added it up. And the number I arrived at was not a number that shocked me. I had known. In the way you know things, you are not quite ready to know, approximately what it was. But seeing it written down in the clear morning light was different from knowing it abstractly. It had a weight, not the weight of resentment. I want to be careful here, because what I felt was not resentment. It was something closer to grief. Grief for all the years I had made myself smaller and softer and more available, convinced that this was what love looked like, convinced that taking up space was somehow selfish, convinced that the asking and the giving were simply the terms of the arrangement. But love is not an arrangement, and I was not a utility. I thought about Tyler's voice the afternoon before, pressed against my arm, asking me with perfect seriousness if I was sad. Children feel the truth of things before they have the language for it. He had felt something that the adults in that room, including me, had been too carefully managing to acknowledge. I picked up the phone and called my attorney. Margaret has been my attorney since I sold the house in Clement Falls. She is a precise, unhurried woman who wears reading glasses on a chain and does not waste words. I trust her completely. Eleanor, she said, because she has caller ID and a good memory. What's on your mind? I told her. I did not tell her emotionally. I told her the way I would have explained a situation to a student. Beginning, middle, relevant details. The question at the end. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I appreciate about her. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment. The loans, she said. Were there any written agreements? No. Any emails or texts that establish them as loans versus gifts? Some texts. I said loan in one of them. Daniel said, I'll pay you back in 2. That helps, she said. The school tuition and the other direct payments are harder. Without documentation framing them as loans, they're likely to be treated as gifts. I understand, I said. What would you like to do? I had thought about this carefully before I called. I did not want to punish my son. I did not want to damage his life or his family's stability or my grandson's sense of security. Those things mattered to me. They still matter to me. But something else also mattered now, something I had let go quiet for too many years. I would like to formalize the outstanding loan, I said. Draw up a proper promissory note for the $89,000, still owed the original amounts less what was repaid, standard terms. And I would like to revise my estate documents. The will, the beneficiary designations, all of it. I've been meaning to update them since Raymond passed. It's been 3 years. That's too long. Another pause. Would you like to come in this week? Thursday. If you have it. I'll make it work, Margaret said. I put the phone down and I sat for a while at Raymond's desk. The sun was high now, the early morning softness gone, the light practical and clear. Outside, a neighbor walked past with a small terrier on a leash. The ordinary world was doing what it does, moving forward, indifferent to the particular reckonings that happen inside people's homes. I thought about the banner. Happy 7th birthday, Tyler. Hand-painted stars. I thought about my grandson's face when he'd seen me in the doorway. That full-body joy, arms wide, socks sliding on the hardwood floor. That was real. That had nothing to do with money or history or the careful accounting of what I'd given and what had been acknowledged. That was just love, uncomplicated and immediate. The way it is between grandparents and grandchildren before the world teaches everyone to hedge it. I was not doing this to hurt anyone. I need to say that and mean it. Because it matters. I was doing this because I had finally understood something that a woman I went to church with once said to me years ago. A woman who had been through her own version of this. Eleanor, you cannot pour from an empty vessel, but more than that, you should not have to. I had nodded at the time without really absorbing it. I was absorbing it now. Daniel called 3 days later. I was in the garden when my phone rang, and I knew from the particular quality of his silence when I answered that he had received Margaret's letter. Mom. His voice had that tightness again, but it was a different kind now. Daniel, I got a letter. From your attorney. I know. A long pause. I don't, Mom. I don't understand what's happening. I sat down on the garden bench, the one Raymond built from a kit the summer before Tyler was born. The wood had weathered beautifully over the years. What do you need me to explain? I asked. Why are you doing this? Why now? Did we do something? Is this about the party? It was not about the party. It was not about one party or one folding chair or one toast that didn't include my name. It was about the accumulation. It was about the years. But I understood why he reached for the party, because that was the last concrete thing, the most recent thing, the easiest thing to point to. It's not about the party, I said. It's about something I should have done a long time ago. The money. Mom, I always planned to pay you back. You know that. I do know that, I said. I believe you. That's why the letter is an opportunity, not a threat. Margaret has drawn up a simple agreement, a reasonable timeline. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. It's not the terms. It's he. Stopped. I waited. It feels like you don't trust us. I looked out at the garden. The rose bush Raymond had planted the year we moved in, which I had nearly killed twice through neglect and brought back both times through stubbornness. It was doing well this year, the best it had looked in a decade. Daniel, I said, I love you. I love Stephanie. I love Tyler more than I have words for. And because of that, I need us to have honesty between us that we haven't had, not just about money. About how we treat each other. He was quiet. You gave a toast at your son's birthday party, I said, gently, because I meant it gently. You thanked a lot of people. I was sitting 12 feet away. The silence that followed was a different kind. Not the silence of someone about to argue, but the silence of someone who has just been handed a mirror and is deciding whether to look at it. Mom, he finally said. And in that single word there was something I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Something young. Something unguarded. I'm not angry, I told him. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not doing any of this from anger. Then why? Because I love myself too, I said. And it took me a while to remember that I'm allowed to. We talked for another hour that evening. It was not an easy conversation, and I will not pretend it resolved everything neatly, because life is not built for neat resolutions. Stephanie called later that week, and that conversation was harder and then better than I expected. There was an apology in it, genuine, not performed, and I accepted it without diminishing it or magnifying it, just let it be what it was. Margaret and I met on Thursday as planned. We revised the documents carefully, thoughtfully. I did not remove Daniel from my estate. I did not do anything punitive or permanent. What I did was restore balance to an arrangement that had quietly, over years, tipped so far that I had stopped being visible as a person and had become instead a resource, a given, something to draw from without acknowledgement. I am a person. I have always been a person. 63 years old and still learning, in the most ordinary ways, what that means. What I know now is this. Love does not require invisibility. Generosity does not require silence. Being a mother, a grandmother, a woman who has given freely and gladly for decades, none of that means you forfeit the right to be seen, to be thanked, to be given the chair at the table that doesn't fold. The week after the documents were filed, Tyler called me on the tablet, he has his own now, a birthday present, and showed me a drawing he'd made at school. It was our two figures, large and small, holding hands. He'd labeled the tall one, Grandma Eleanor, in his new, careful handwriting, each letter deliberate, slightly too large. I made it for you, he said. Can I have it? I asked. He looked at it for a moment, the way children weigh decisions that matter to them. I'll mail it, he said seriously. It arrived on a Wednesday, folded in thirds inside an envelope that also contained a sticker of a rocket ship. I unfolded it and smoothed it against the desk in Raymond's study. Our two figures, holding hands. The lines were imprecise, the proportions charmingly wrong, the colors bolder than the situation warranted. I put it on the refrigerator next to the photo I'd printed 7 months ago, Tyler. In the empty living room of the new house, arms spread wide, gap-toothed, and grinning. There are things in this life you cannot buy with $83,000 or buy back with a promissory note or repair with a revised estate document. My son is not a bad man. He became careless in the particular way that people become careless with things they are certain of. Certain they will always have. Certain will always be there when they need it. I had made myself easy to take for granted, and some portion of what happened is mine to own. But I am done being easy to take for granted. I am not starting over. I am 63 years old, and starting over is a young person's language. What I am doing is something more specific. I am returning to myself, to the woman who raised a son and kept a rosebush alive through 2 near deaths and drove 3 hours across the state because she loves her grandson with the whole of what she is. That woman deserves a chair at the table. That woman deserves to be thanked by name. That woman deserves to give when she chooses to give, and to be asked before anything is assumed, and to be held as a person complicated, necessary, worthy, rather than as a function. Raymond used to say, I didn't waver when it counted. I think he was right. I think I just forgot, for a while, that I counted too. The morning after the documents were finalized, I woke before the alarm the way I've done my whole life. The light thin and early, the house absolutely still. I made coffee in the kitchen and carried it to the garden and sat on Raymond's bench and watched the sun come up over the rosebush. Not dramatically, not with any particular ceremony, just the sun, doing what it has always done, reliable and indifferent and extraordinarily beautiful, turning the sky from nothing into everything 1 slow degree at a time. I held my cup, and I breathed, and I did not need to be anywhere or anyone other than exactly where and who I was. The morning was warm. The coffee was good. Somewhere in the neighborhood, a bird was working through a song it had just invented. It was the most peaceful I had felt in years.